Halloween, Hellraiser, and Scream are all back, so how about some Evil Dead? Ever since Ash vs. Evil Dead was canceled back in 2018, we've been trying to figure out where it would go next. Like, I literally did a video called Where Does Evil Dead Go From Here back when that happened. So back then, even though he said Ash was retired, Bruce Campbell started talking about him showing up in a video game, which we now know is Dead by Daylight, and I think that was a pretty good reason to come out of retirement, but he's also talked about the movies coming back in a pretty big way as well. It got to the point where after dropping hints at conventions and talking about it in interviews, it was confirmed that Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi are working on a brand new Evil Dead movie. I think it was like July of last year when all of this started really going on. And then in January of this year, which honestly feels like 4 years ago at this point, Sam Raimi did an AMA in support of the new Grudge movie, which was god awful in my opinion, but he talked about how they were doing a new Evil Dead movie and they had a new young director signed on to write and direct it. And then finally today we got all the info, including the director's name, which is Lee Cronin, who you might know from last year's The Hole in the Ground, which was an A24 movie I think they just dumped onto VOD, even though I heard it was really good. We also got the title of the movie, which is Evil Dead Now, and for those of you who were hoping Ash would return in it, I'm sorry to say he's not going to be in this movie, and it's actually going to be a new female protagonist, not his daughter from Ash vs. Evil Dead or Mia from Evil Dead 2013. He said from this point forward, the Evil Dead movies kind of have to stand on their own. You could have different heroes, different heroines. In this case, we just wanted to keep the series current, and the mantra really is that our heroes and heroines are just regular people. That's what we're going to continue. I normally don't do videos when movies are announced, but the reason I'm doing this one is because we have so much info, and I really think that comes down to the fact that they've been trickling out all the smaller details over the past few months, and today was the big blowout, which I honestly like that a lot better because I think the movie is a lot farther along than we think. Bruce Campbell said they're going to get it out as soon as practical, which I think is in reference to the virus and the quarantine and everything that's happening right now, so that tells me we'll probably see this movie by the end of next year or sometime in the middle of 2022. I know that's kind of far away when you really think about it, but with a movie, that's a lot sooner than they usually are announced. Before we get too deep into it though, I wanted to tell you guys about my podcast Fear Frequency because it's been a while since I mentioned it. If you haven't heard of it before, it's linked down below. My best friend George and I sit down every week and talk about not only the biggest horror news out there, but also what games we've been playing and what movies we've been watching. So if you're looking for new stuff to play or watch, or you just want to catch up on the news I don't talk about on my channel, it's basically the perfect show for that. So again, it's linked down in the description. Let's get back to the video. And to be completely real with you guys, this is a lot to process. The reason this announcement really caught me off guard is because I love Evil Dead 2013 to the point that it's one of my favorite movies of all time. And with Fede Alvarez talking about the 7th anniversary of that movie, sharing photos from the set, and going on podcasts to talk about behind the scenes stuff, and the director's cut coming out recently, it really got me thinking that we might be seeing an announcement for a sequel to that movie. So seeing a completely different Evil Dead movie get announced after all of that just feels a little weird to me. The silver lining there though is that nothing really seems to be off the table with this franchise. Sam Raimi was asked if he'd come back and direct a new Evil Dead movie, and he said, yeah, I'd love to do it as long as Bruce Campbell comes back and plays Ash. So while we might be waiting just a little while for that to happen, he also said if Fede Alvarez called him up and said he wanted to do a sequel to Evil Dead 2013, he'd be totally happy to have that happen as well. And honestly, I'm fine with the fact that the Evil Dead universe, instead of being this long continuous story, is one connected universe where new filmmakers can come in and put their own twist on the franchise and just follow a core set of rules. I think that's better because we'll get more movies faster in the long run instead of like a new movie or a TV show every decade or so. And there's no denying that Ash is the real draw of the franchise for a lot of people, but I don't think the Deadites or the Necronomicon or any of the core tenets of Evil Dead are any less iconic. Like, Ash is great. I love him. He's one of my favorite horror movie characters. I have a ton of different action figures of him, but I'm not totally opposed to the idea of Evil Dead without Ash, and we'll get into that a little more later. And as far as the title Evil Dead Now goes, I honestly like it a lot. You can't put a number after any movie in this franchise anymore, I don't think, because the only one that has a number is Evil Dead 2, which is kind of a remake of the first Evil Dead, which is a remake of a short film, and then we've got Evil Dead 2013. Like, this franchise has a massive naming problem, so just going Evil Dead Now works totally well for me. It really comes off like the shed scene in Evil Dead 2 to me. like the evil is here, you need to make it dead, and you need to do it now. It's just kind of summing up what the movie is probably going to be about. And since everything in the Evil Dead universe that's happened so far is pretty much canon, I like the idea that filmmakers can come in and cherry pick the best stuff from each movie or TV show that's happened thus far and make the best Evil Dead we've ever seen. You know, that's kind of like the best case scenario, and it might not happen that way, but the potential is there. That's all I'm trying to say. I also want to go back and talk about the line from Bruce Campbell that their heroes and heroines are just regular people. When you look at Ash at the end of Ash vs. Evil Dead, it's kind of hard to see it that way because he has a robot hand and he's about to take on the Deadite apocalypse. You know, it's like really hard to see him as just a regular guy. But if you go back to the beginning of the franchise or you look at Evil Dead 2013, that definitely holds true. If you look at Evil Dead 2013, it's definitely not like Mia is this perfect shining example of a human being. She's a drug addicted person who's coming to shake that addiction because her friends literally forced her up to this cabin. She's done it before and failed, and she turned to drugs in the first place because she was left alone to deal with her dying mother by her older brother. I don't know why that rhymed. It's kind of like a heavy topic to have a rhyme like that, but I think I'm just gonna leave it in. The point is, both of the main characters we've had so far in this franchise are pretty flawed people who have had to overcome some pretty gnarly stuff to be able to save themselves and as many of their friends as possible. And I think that's really cool, and it's what makes Evil Dead unique, other than the awesome filmmaking. That also plays a part. So if you start out with an up-and-coming director coming into the franchise with a ton of new ideas, but force them to use a flawed main character and the Deadites coming into our world via the Necronomicon or some other way, I really think it has potential to pay off. What I really mean is if I'm a YouTuber or I make a short film or a feature that only ends up at festivals but has some really cool stuff in it, and then I'm handed the keys to one of the biggest horror castles in the world and I knock it out of the park, that could just kickstart my career completely. Not me personally, just if I am one of those people who's trying to get their start. Because you know, when you're starting out your career, that's when you have all of your biggest and best ideas before they're totally beaten down by the people who have all the money. And of course, after these people move on and become big successes, they should be able to come back whenever they want and make a sequel to their awesome Evil Dead movie. I am looking directly at you, Fede Alvarez. Please make another Evil Dead movie. I can't really give my opinion on Lee Cronin as the writer and director because I haven't seen The Hole in the Ground, but I will say I fully trust Sam Raimi to find the right person for this franchise. He already did it once with Fede Alvarez in Evil Dead 2013, and he also picked out a really good director for the movie Crawl, which he produced last year. It's the guy who did the Hills Have Eyes remake. I'm forgetting his name. I don't want to Google it right now, but you know who I mean. I gotta be totally honest with you guys, I think he has a bit of a challenge in front of him because not only is he coming off Ash vs. Evil Dead, which a lot of fans liked and it did feature Ash, he's also following up Evil Dead 2013, which Bloody Disgusting just called the best movie of the last decade. Also, Fede Alvarez has been talking about it a lot, and we recently got the director's cut, which is even gorier and bloodier. I mean, it's gonna be really, really tough to follow up the scene where it's raining actual blood from the skies. That's all practical, and Mia is chainsawing the abomination in half. Again, all practical. It's just, that was such a cool scene, but I hope this guy is up to the challenge, because if he can beat some of those moments in Evil Dead 2013 and some of the best stuff in Ash vs. Evil Dead, we are definitely in for a treat. We're in for a really good Evil Dead movie. At the end of the day, I'm just glad we're getting more Evil Dead. It's one of my favorite franchises in the entire world, and even though it's had its ups and downs and it's never really been this massive cash cow for Sony, is who I think owns it, it really is an awesome series, and it's never ever died. It's kind of like a Deadite. You just can't kill Evil Dead, whether it's a video game or a TV show or a movie. There's always been something for us fans of this franchise, so seeing it get back on track with a full-on feature film is exactly what I want. I can already see the comments from people who won't watch anything that doesn't have Bruce Campbell in it, but he is not gone from this franchise. He's just retired as Ash. He's still behind the scenes making sure it feels like it fits in with the rest of the movies and everything else. So I feel like you should just give it a chance. It doesn't really hurt you at all to go out and see a new movie, even if Bruce Campbell isn't in it, you know? It's like, that's just a bad argument in my opinion. I'll always go to bat for Evil Dead because not only does it have roots in my home state of Michigan, it's a true indie project that grew into something massive. It also evolved into something where it gives people a platform to start their careers, and it's also the only true slasher franchise where the hero is the iconic character we take away from it instead of the villain, which makes it unique in my eyes. But with all that being said, I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I think this is the best way they could go, because really I think the smartest smartest decision would have been to make a sequel to Evil Dead 2013. They really just set up a good story that could continue on, and to just leave that alone for now seems like a mistake to me. Like I mentioned, it's at the height of its popularity. I think people would be really happy to see Fede Alvarez come back to this franchise, and he's mentioned a few times that he would like to do it. So starting from scratch once again, I don't know if it's the greatest idea, but I'm here for it because of all the reasons I already mentioned. You know, I'm just right on the middle of the line between nervous and really excited, just because I love the franchise so much. Anyway guys, that's all I have for you today on Evil Dead Now. Make sure you let me know down in the comments what you think of all of these updates, and if you want to see more Evil Dead videos on the channel, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe. Anyway guys, my name is Jimmy Champane, and I'll see you in the next one. Shape on.